Hello, Pam. Welcome to the Empathy Edge podcast. We finally made this happen. I'm so excited to have you today.
Likewise, I'm so happy to be here, Maria.
It's so good to have you here, and I am so excited for folks to check out the book, Growing Groups into Teams. There were several aha moments for me in the book, and we're going to get to those in a second. But, in your work as an executive team coach, as an author, and as a speaker, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into this work and why you're so passionate about empowering leaders?
So I've been fascinated, ever since I was a little kid, of how organizations run, and especially whether the people there, like, growing up at the pizza restaurant and the bank, why they looked really unhappy in some places and looked really happy in some places, why policies made sense or didn't make sense. And then I would try to figure out, like, is this place making any money? And are the people who are working there, like, are they doing okay? And so the social science side of business has always really, really appealed to me. And
Yeah.
I got to write the organization studies major at UC Davis and then go get an MBA. And I just love to be where leaders are thinking about, how do I make great strategic decisions and do it work with the organization in a way that has everyone able to make good on the
Hmm.
strategy and
Yeah.
also to thrive while they're doing it.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny how many of my guests, their story often starts with, as a little kid, I was always curious about X. Well, and I love this because, there's people that excel at the actual work and the actual industry.
Yeah.
And then there's people like us that can't commit to one industry or one type of thing, but we're just fascinated with how leaders lead and how, for me also, it's also how brands and leaders connect with their employees or connect with their customers and clients. I kind of don't care what business they're in, but it's the actual the business of the business that I'm kind of fascinated by. So I love to hear that. And as you know, your book very, very pointedly talks about, is doing and leading are different things. And we've fallen into this thing where we promote the people who've been doing the work the best rather than the people that can do the work of leading. So I would like to start us off with the big aha I had with the book, which was that there's a difference between a group or a department or a function and a team. Can you explain to us the difference?
Absolutely. And you're not the only one who was like, wait a minute, 2x4 to the head. I've been noticing this for a long time, but I didn't have the words to create the difference. So a group are people who are connected in some way. And often in the workplace, it's because they all report to the same quote boss.
Hmm.
Or maybe, as you say, a function. And often they'll call themselves a team. And that doesn't make them a team at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I worked with one executive team that Series B, amazing startup. They're doing so well. They're growing like crazy. Wonderful people. And they said, we haven't really properly operated as an executive team. We've now got some executives and let's operate as a team. And their act of declaring the team was creating a Monday meeting and opening a Google Doc. And they're like, okay, we're a team now. We have a Google Doc. Turns out that a few months in, what they realized is they needed something more. And those something more are fundamentally two things. One, a shared promise.
Hmm.
The act of making a promise together that creates the team. No
Hmm.
promise, no team.
I love that.
So the team exists to fulfill something. If they succeed and fulfill it, then they say, huh, what's our next challenge? Or are we no longer a team and we go off and we do other things? The second thing it takes is a commitment to coordinate well to fulfill that promise.
Mm,
If you don't have that, then you're a bunch of people who all have the same dream.
yeah.
Maybe you're a bunch of contractors who kind of operate in a hub and spoke way with the central leader person,
Hmm.
but you're not a team. You're a group of disconnected people in your silos because you're
Hmm.
not coordinating as you need to fulfill the promise.
I love that. And you're making me think back to a prior guest I have. I'll put a link in the show notes. Carrie Melissa Jones. She is an online community expert. She wrote a book called Building Brand Communities. And in her interview, we talked a lot about that concept of people think just bringing their users together makes it a community, or just putting everybody on a group on social media makes them a community. But to your point, I think they have like 7 checkpoints of what makes it an actual community. And one of them, which I never thought about before, but it's kind of linked to your act of creating a promise and commitment to coordination, is they have to have mutual care. There has to be a reason that they actually care about the success of each other. So she consults with a lot of big companies and they're trying to turn their user groups into communities.
Babies.
But it doesn't make them a community to just all be users of the same product, which it sounds like is similar to the
Oh,
premise in the book and to your work, is that just
yeah.
because you're all in the same function, reporting to
Well,
the same
I'm gonna
boss, it doesn't make you a
right.
team.
Yeah. I'm excited to go listen to that podcast because one of the things I'm fascinated with is where teams and communities intersect and where they're actually different. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, one of the things that is absolutely fundamental about community is that they commit to be in relationship with each other or
Mm-hmm.
be in that care. And teams are also in a common care. It is a care to accomplish something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, often teams are also communities.
Yes. Yeah. If you
And
if you're
within,
lucky, if you have a great team,
if,
it feels like a community. And you know, I've talked
yes,
often on this show about the fact that, when many of my best friends I met at work. I met my husband at work, right? Like, and these are people I've had lifelong friendships with, and it doesn't mean you have to. We're
right,
both familiar with the work of Shasta Nelson and the business
yes,
of friendship and how
yes,
having a friend at work increases engagement and performance and reduces absenteeism and turnover and all that good stuff. But I guess, what a great follow-up question to that would be is, so what do we do? How do we create that team that has that mutual respect, that mutual promise, and that mutual care? And I'm not going to give away the entire book, but what are some of the ways that you've seen work, and what are some of the pitfalls that
okay,
people think they're building a team but they're not?
absolutely. So, you had said, if by luck you have that sort of group, and sometimes it happens by luck that you have a group that becomes a team that becomes a community where you care about each other. But if you don't want to wait for luck, what are some of the things that you can do?
Right.
So, this is where your work is just front and center. You bring empathy because how are you possibly going to build a community that cares about accomplishing a promise and cares about each other without actually being interested in and asking about and observing and looking for what does each person on the team light up about? Where do they connect with the mission of our organization, with the promise of this team? How are they wired? What makes it a great day for them? And so bringing that kind of noticing and empathy is crucial.
I love that. What makes it a great day for them? I think just right there, if any of my folks listening can start with asking themselves that question for their team members, I think that would go a long way, because that will drive your decisions and that will drive your actions on where to go next to make it a place where they feel like they belong and that they're contributing to the common cause, right? Um, you talk about conversations for relationship. Can you tell us what those are and how do they show up at work?
Yeah, so we see that there are 4 absolutely essential kinds of conversations that teams must have. One is a conversation for possibility. And I don't mean once, I mean many times along the way. What could we do? How could this work? Second is a conversation for decisions. Third is a conversation for action. Now, you and I have probably both seen lots of teams that rush into action before they've had decisions or even considered all the possibilities.
Right,
So,
right.
like, you look around and they've all scattered to go act, and it's like, did we make a decision together?
Yeah. What are we doing again? Yeah, exactly.
And then we say underneath all that is a conversation for a relationship, even if it's not happening out loud. There is
Mhm.
always a conversation going, am I respected here? Do people value what I bring to the team? Do they value who I am as a person? Will people have my back and some grace? You and I have talked about grace with each other as we navigate, being moms and sandwich generation and writers and consultants and speakers and all of that. That sometimes we have to have grace with ourselves and each other. So, will somebody on this team have grace with me? And one of the most powerful things that we've seen in turning teams around is to point out often to the leaders in the organization that conversation for relationship is always happening. You just don't know what they're saying,
Mm,
and you're not in the conversation, so you can't influence it.
yeah.
And then people really get, oh, right. They're human. They're going to be asking, do I matter here? They're going to
Right.
be asking all of those questions. And so, what if I actually made the time to go for a walk with them, to have coffee over Zoom or in person, to show that I've got some grace while I keep standards? And here's where your book on empathy dilemma really, really shines, Maria, is it's not a choice between standards and compassion.
Hmm.
It's both.
Preach. I love it. I love it. Are those conversations happening in our own heads? Is that the point?
Often they do. And the conversations for relationship, because we have this mythology that we can't maybe be humans at work,
Hmm.
um, they are the ones that go most inward. Now, sometimes
Hmm.
conversations for decisions also happen in people's heads. People decide things and we ask, well, when was that decided? I don't know. Just I decided that. I decided
Yeah,
that. And then
exactly.
I might have forgotten to tell the rest of the team.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
no surprise, we're rather misaligned right now. So all of these things happen in our heads. Conversations for possibilities happen in our head too.
Hmm.
We think through what could we do. I remember one conversation that just really grabbed me, and I wrote about it in growing groups into teams in the chapter on executive teams, and working with the top team of a public company, and they had so few conversations with each other. I mean, other than polite and superficial and all of that,
Yeah.
and sometimes not polite, but definitely not deep and not
Yeah.
about their relationships, that they didn't know that each other wanted exactly the same thing that they wanted.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it took elevating one of them to CEO.
Hmm.
I interviewed all the members of the team and came back and said, I think you guys are going to be amazed, but you all said these 7 things. And they're like, no way. And
Well,
so,
we're
yeah,
so busy running and we're so busy
yes,
in the busyness that we don't take time to work on the business, right? And this is true when I've done brand workshops in the past. And I what I do with my teams when I do brand engagements and brand story engagements is I have each of the folks participating in the workshop fill out a pre-work questionnaire, and they're not allowed to help each other. They're not allowed to see each other because I want to see where each of them are coming from because I have a cross-functional team, not just marketing. And it's so interesting to me where it's like, okay, all of you described the business you're in as a company in a different way.
right.
Most of you disagreed on who your ideal customer is. They seem like decisions that we should have been all talking about, but we're so busy running at 100 miles an hour that we actually didn't stop to see if we were aligned. And that's half my value right there before I've even delivered anything is to get them to talk about it in a room and have, 4 to 6 hours where they're forced to actually have those conversations with each other.
I love that. And I love that you put, brand and leadership and strategy together. And for teams, your brand is your promise. What
Mhm.
is your team's promise? What are you going to deliver to your organization or your customer? And how are you going to do it? And I love when teams are thoughtful about their brand in the organization. Are we the
Mhm.
team that we're masters at connecting other teams in the organization with each other, which is great because we used to have to do all the stuff because they weren't talking to each other. But what if we could get them actually connected with each other?
Yeah.
Um, and so I've seen teams have some really distinctive brands that made a difference. There was an organization I worked with where I love these people, but they were sort of the key brains inside this organization. They all had PhDs. They were from different countries. They had different backgrounds. Absolutely brilliant humans. I sometimes call them the 7 grumpy PhDs. And one of them said, nothing in my background has ever prepared me to coordinate with other people. And we worked on it. And it just a 15%, 20% change in their willingness to coordinate with each other and think about how do we want the rest of the organization to understand us? Do we want them to understand us as 7 disconnected individuals who just argue with each other and can't give us a clear answer? Do we want them to understand us as, well, 7 amazing individuals who have great backgrounds that combine to form a solution for the organization?
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what in your experience, and, please feel free to share any stories. What becomes possible when the executive leaders that you work with learn to bring empathy to their work? Is that where the team, quote unquote, starts? Or how have
Um,
you seen it manifest?
I have seen teams start just as the team, even though the executive team has no concept of team. In fact, sometimes they're the last ones to get on board because, as you
Mm-hmm.
say, they're cross functional. They're used to leading in their fiefdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And then they discover that they're each playing very, very different games that do not add up to running the organization,
For
right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
if we waited for all the executive teams to get on board, we might not have amazing teams in the organization, which is why I work mostly with executive teams. So, like,
Yeah.
this is going to so shortcut things for your organization. So I
Yeah.
think there's a couple of benefits. One is the rest of the organization gets to see how to function as a team.
Mm-hmm. It's a model.
Yeah. And they learn it really fast when their leaders are practicing that and saying, you know what, that impacts what finance does. Let me just coordinate with the CFO. I'll get right back to you. And then they do. It wasn't some they go
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation and say, yep, we're totally aligned on this. We can move forward. And
Mm-hmm.
that's all what many people deeper in an organization want, is that
Mm-hmm.
they can move forward knowing that they're not wasting their time, that if
Yeah.
they work really hard on something, it's something that the organization can actually use and move forward. So that's part
Mm-hmm.
of it. The other thing, and this has never been more important, is the organization can change. We have a saying in organizational development: low trust, slow change. So
Mm.
if you want your organization to change fast, right now everybody does, you've got to build that trust. And one of the things that rests on
Mm-hmm.
is, and you might have run into the trust chapter in the book where we lay out a whole bunch of factors that contribute, that add up to trust. One of those things is intentions. Do I understand why you're here, what it is you're intending to accomplish, and also your motivations for doing that? Is it because you want to build a legacy in this industry? Is it because you love running things? Is it because you think we can make so much money doing this? Is it because you think that we are going to make customers so delighted they will never go anywhere else?
Right.
It can be many things, but if I don't know what you're about and why you're here and what you're motivated by, if I can't trust that,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be really hard for me to say yes to your change initiative, which is inevitably going to make me. I mean, what change does is takes competent people and makes them incompetent. And then
Mm-hmm.
we keep cycling through that cycle because I used to be great at what we did. And now we're doing something different. And I have to figure out who to talk to, get in the groove of how to do it. And so I need to know what's important to you. And also, I need to know that you respect your relationship with me, that we're in a respectful relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because there are times I'm going to look super awkward.
Mm-hmm.
There are times I'm going to do something that it turns out it didn't work. And I don't know how we ever create change, do new things, and expect it to be perfect. Right?
Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
reality that life isn't like that. So if we want people to change rapidly, willingly, with a spirit of experimentation, then we need to make sure that the leaders have some empathy and are building trust with folks, and people will know you have their back. You will come
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation that says, it looks like that thing isn't working out. What shall we do now? And how do we make sure that you are, you know, resourced in the best way we can, which may be
Mm-hmm.
suboptimal, but in the best
Yeah.
way we can to
Yeah.
move this forward?
Well, it's just so funny because I've never thought of it that way. And this is why I love hosting a podcast because my guests are constantly like, truth bombs. We know this in our personal lives, right? You meet a stranger in the park and they say, come here, I want to show you something. You want to know what their intention is, what their motivation is, and who this person is, or you're not
Right.
taking a step in that direction.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
why would we think it's any different when we're in a workplace? Is do we think it's different because we allegedly know each other, quote unquote? But if there's no empathy, then I don't feel like you really know me, and you don't feel like I really know you because neither of us are trying to see each other's point of view. So it's another one of those like schoolyard lessons that applies to the workplace, other than be respectful, be kind, be empathetic, and collaborative. It's you cannot trust someone to take a step or unless they've earned that trust. And to your point, I think that is something that we say all the time, but what does that mean? You're giving us something very actionable, which is communicate and be clear about your intentions and your motivations. Be vulnerable and let them know so they can trust you and be willing to take that step. And there's so
Yes.
many leaders that just think they're going to take that step because I'm going to tell them they have to take that step. And
And it's
some
going to be
might, you
slow.
might get
Yeah.
some compliance, but it's short-term engagement. And really, how much are they going to adopt the change and how quickly will they adopt the change with that mindset? However, if you can encourage them to trust you and willingly take that step forward on their own accord, so that's where I'm really seeing the empathy coming in because it's not only about the clarity pillar of my book, The
Which
Empathy
I
Dilemma,
love.
but it's also this idea of I need to understand you and your fears and your values so that I can frame this in the right way to make you want to take a step
Yes.
towards the change.
And as you point out in your books, it goes both ways. It's multi-directional, right?
Yes.
So I need to know, if I'm working for you, that you understand what I am about and
Hmm.
where I connect with the promise that we're making. And
Hmm.
I need to understand what you're about. And what's fascinated me, as I've been doing this for 25 years, what's fascinated me is that there's not like one right answer, or a um there's a few wrong answers. Wrong answer is I'm here to screw you all over, sell the company, and not fulfill my promises on the back end. Right? That's, I've seen it, and it's
Yeah.
the wrong answer.
Yeah. And I'm
But
willing to run over any of you to get there.
any of
Yeah.
you to get there. Um, but I, have worked with some leaders who are unapologetically coin operated. And they're
Hmm.
just like, we are here to maximize my bonus. And along the way, I'm going to make sure we maximize your bonus too. So if you're ever wondering why I made a certain decision, think, what will be my bonus at the end of the year? And people follow this person. It's not like
Right.
it has to be some, soft,
Noble. Yeah, exactly. As long
noble
this is the
thing.
thing. It's just like brand. Take a stand, put a stake in the ground, and say, this is what we're about. You're either on board or you're not, but at least you give people the accurate information to make a decision. I have said that even about companies that have done some really awful things with their employees, with their structures. Um, but I've always said, well, at least now you know what you're getting into. They
They
have
told you who
taken a
they are.
stand on this. This is who they are. Now
Right.
you have agency to decide
Exactly.
if you are going to sign on for that or if you're going to not. And
Yeah.
so, and for some people that might resonate for them and say, yes, I want that too. And it doesn't have to be, yeah, it doesn't have to be noble. It doesn't have to be, solving world problems. Hopefully it is. Hopefully businesses are doing something in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
But to your point, it's about honesty and it's
Yes.
about very clearly laying that out. Um, where do you see, I know what I talk about on this show all the time and in my books, but where do you see with the leaders you work with empathy go wrong or get misused as people lead? What have you seen?
Yeah. Um, Mostly the number one ways it gets misused is it doesn't get turned on at all.
It doesn't get used, right?
It doesn't get used. And this is not everyone. I mean, I know some
Right, of
wonderful, in
course.
fact, the best CEOs I've worked with are
Uh-huh.
highly,
Mm-hmm.
highly empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in their organization thinks, God, we got so lucky. We got the empathetic CEO. But then I'm like, well, yeah, over there, there's one too. Over there, there's one too.
Yeah,
But then sometimes notably, there's not.
right.
Um, the second thing is people think they're being empathetic. So I was with a team yesterday in another state, a team of leaders I've been working with for a year,
Mm-hmm.
and they're taking on a bunch of change. And we know that design is how you start change, and design starts with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So our first question is, who are you designing for? And also, can you design with them rather than just for them?
Right.
And say, what would, like, what's important to them about this? And so the guy, one of the leaders was happy to speak up about this. And he said, well, this, and this is important. And I said, who is that important to? He's like, yeah, these folks. And I didn't even have to say there was somebody else in the room who said, actually, I think what's important to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little closer to these people we're designing for.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I think they say. And people were like, wow, that's good. That's really interesting. I would never have thought of that. So they think they're being empathetic,
Yeah.
but not. But that's fine. I have seen this fellow make so many wonderful advancements over the last year that I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure he's going to get there on this too. And this was probably a pretty big wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sometimes people think they're being empathetic, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Then the
Well, they're making
third,
assumptions. Yeah,
they're making it
that's where I
from their
see that's
own
always yeah,
lens.
that's always the caveat with cognitive empathy because
Yes,
cognitive empathy is imagining what it might be like for
right.
someone else, which is a useful starting point, but you have to vet that because you're
Yes.
actually envisioning it from your own experience and your own bias. So you don't actually know unless you ask.
I there was a keynote that I used to give maybe 10 years ago or so. And I was talking about the difference in cognitive empathy and compassion. And I found a picture of an engineer from, I think it was Ford, but I might have the auto company wrong,
Mhm.
wearing one of those pregnancy bellies, like those foam bellies,
Yeah.
and seeing that he could fit into the car and he had a big thumbs up. And I'm
Oh,
thinking, this does not mean he knows what it feels like to be pregnant. Like he's trying,
no.
he's trying. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate the effort, but he
Yeah, I'm like,
still
that's a
might,
step beyond. I actually, we need to applaud that. Yeah.
want to connect with actual pregnant people
Right.
if you were going into the car and seeing if they can reach all the stuff.
Completely. Completely. Yeah. I mean, that's just like another example of when we talk about um, what's finally getting talked about is that so much of medical research has been done on men and on one or two specific groups of people. And then we expect those medications and those treatments to work on everybody.
Yeah.
But we really need to be more inclusive in the medical research area so that we actually understand what the impact is for this group of people versus that group of people. It could be very, very different. So it kind of reminds me of that of like, well, we had a proxy for that group of the guy with the pregnancy belly on, which is actually really cute. I'm sorry. That's actually really funny.
It is a
Um,
cute
yeah.
picture, but I'm thinking, are there any actual women
Are
who might be pregnant who
anybody's
work there?
spouses who might be pregnant, who might be willing to just come in and
I
sit
don't
in the
know.
prototype and just tell us what they
Yeah,
think?
how it
Yeah.
works. Yeah,
Have you ever, just this is a total tangent, but
fine.
that's the thing I always think when I use a product or I'm the recipient of a service and something goes really wrong and I'm like, did anyone test this? Like, did anyone actually do any consumer testing or user testing on what this experience was going to be like? Because I can't imagine somebody would do this to somebody else. I find myself
Absolutely.
thinking that all the time. I don't know if that's my marketing brain or whatever happening
Well,
there.
and in healthcare too, and you and I do a lot of thinking about healthcare. About half
Hmm.
my client base is
Oh my
like
gosh,
health
yes.
systems and biotech.
Yes.
And um the difference between, and I see this a lot now that my mom is 87, she's doing pretty well, but
Hmm.
she's sometimes frail. And the things she's expected to be able to open, even the doors to get into the clinic are
Right.
not ones that, yeah,
Yeah, they're too heavy. I think about that now, like in my 50s.
yeah,
I'm like, I can't even read. I give it to my 10-and-a-half-year-old son to read a medicine bottle because I
yeah,
can't read the directions on it. Right.
yeah.
I'm like, what am I going to do when I'm 80? Like, who put this on here?
That is my biggest motivation
Yeah.
to lift weights and work out.
I know, me
It's
too.
because,
Me too.
yeah,
Yeah, completely. I know we went on a little tangent there, but it's so true. It's about ultimately it's about seeing things from other people's perspective and not just your users and your customers, but your employees as well. So, and your leaders. So obviously my work is all about helping leaders strengthen their empathy, but I want to get your perspective in the trenches, working with executives. What are a few tips or examples you can give us of things that you've done with your clients to help them tap into that empathy and to strengthen that muscle?
yeah. So quite some years ago, I did research with, do you know Sharon Richmond? You might. She's part of our community here.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, she's been in our Silicon Valley kind of consulting community for a while,
Uh-huh.
and we've joined up together with Altus. She and I did research on 265 leaders to find out how they developed their emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And these were all leaders who knew their Myers-Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we correlated them up, and it was hilarious. And the point I'm getting to is not everybody develops empathy in the same way. So
Mm-hmm.
just as we're asking leaders to understand the individuals on their team,
Mm-hmm.
when I support an exec team, I want to understand them as individuals. And
Mm-hmm.
for some of them, what they really want is to look and watch people who are very effective. Sometimes I hook them up with somebody, you know, uh, in a different function, a level or two below, who is a rock star at leading
Mm-hmm.
empathy in the way that they need to learn, and say,
Mm-hmm.
could they go to your meetings? Could they, like,
Yeah,
it's
what
a
are they what
little,
are they doing? Yeah.
what are they doing? Because some people learn really well from watching others. Other people love to learn from feedback where they say to your team, you know, I'm aiming to get better at
Mm-hmm.
asking enough questions so I understand instead of always deciding things from my frame of reference. So if I forget to do that, will you help me? Will you give me some feedback on how I'm doing?
Right.
Because I know I will be better if I get your perspectives. I hired a smart team. I want to hear what you say, and I just forget that I need to
Mm-hmm.
ask.
I
Right?
love that.
Other people, it's from one-on-one coaching. Other
Mm-hmm.
people, it's from sometimes even watching movies or reading
Yes.
novels. And
Explore with your imagination from the Empathy Edge book. That was one of my tips to help leaders
oh,
strengthen
cool.
their empathy. It's about reading and consuming art and media and documentaries and movies about people who are not like you and being able to flex that muscle of wondering what things might be like for them, but also seeing a
Exactly.
different life experience.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. So that's
And
worked
so
for all your folks too.
different people want different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's helpful to have, we find a menu of ways that they can grow themselves. And there's also, as you talk about, there's different sorts of things you can do. One way to express empathy is to learn a formal design process Another way to express empathy is just to go to a walk with someone or say, hey, how you doing? And really mean it
Yeah. And really listen to the answer.
and
Yeah.
really listen. So we ask everybody to set their own goals for the leadership edges that they're working,
Hmm.
and then come up with some individual things that they can do. And then there's things that we set as a team. So there's a process we've done with our team, and we often do with other leadership teams, where we look at 25 factors that really make a difference in teams and say, how are we doing on these? And which ones we want to come up with just a few, which ones that if we actually work it hard,
Hmm.
focus on it together,
Hmm.
would really make a difference for the team.
What are some of those factors
Uh,
that we need to
so,
look at as teams to create
yeah,
teams?
yeah. One that's so powerful in the research and so experientially powerful too is, how well do we represent the views of people who aren't present?
Mm.
If I can trust the CTO, I'm the chief product officer, the CTO is at the meeting, are they going to fairly represent my views? Will they say something like, here's what I see. I just want to be open that Pam, the chief product officer, um, mentioned to me her concern about this and this. And I think that's a fair concern to address. Is that the kind of relationship that we have?
Hmm.
And so that requires listening to people.
Hmm.
It requires valuing their perspective.
Hmm.
And it requires um, really living into that second element of being a team. I will collaborate well to produce the
Yeah.
promise.
What are a few other of those factors? Those are
Yeah.
fascinating.
So one is, we communicate in a coordinated way to drive clarity across the organization.
Mm, more teams need that.
That's a frequent low one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one is, we admit and learn from weaknesses and mistakes.
Oh, that gets all to self-awareness and just understanding how we show up and being honest with ourselves
Yeah.
about how we show up, so that we can improve. We can have a growth mindset around it.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Give us one more.
Um, oh, we go directly to the person when we've got a
When we got an
problem.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, it's so frequent. And we spend a lot of time talking about people and
mm-hmm.
less time talking to them. And this happens not just with teams that have a bit of a hard edge. This
Mm-hmm.
happens with the nicest Midwest team.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that I can't say it directly to the person. So what they learn is they can say it directly to the person.
Yeah.
And there is an enormous amount of respect that I'm showing you by saying, I'm concerned that this behavior I'm seeing can get in the way of you fulfilling the potential that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't claim that I'm right, but I'm seeing something and I would love to share it.
Yeah. Well, and that's empathetic. That's actually helping somebody be their best and giving them the opportunity to improve.
Yes.
And, what we often do, and this is, I'm sure you've met these leaders who, in the name of empathy, delay those conversations or delay those decisions because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right.
But it ends up not only being detrimental to that employee or that coworker, but it's detrimental to the whole team because the whole team is suffering because of that person's actions, whether those actions are subconscious or conscious. And so it's actually not empathetic to avoid. And I hate the way we talk about it in terms of we always use the term conflict avoidant, but it doesn't mean you're going to have a conflict just because
Right.
you're going to share feedback with somebody. Why do we assume it's automatically going to be a conflict when we share feedback? We
100%.
can do it in a way. And even those of us, I have to share, even those of us who kind of can come across a certain way, that's always the hesitancy is like, well, they're going to be offended, they're going to get upset with me, it's going to sound really harsh. This is where the self-awareness comes in. I know that, I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm an Italian. Like, I know sometimes even when I'm being direct, even if I'm trying to say it in my kindest voice, it can sound very harsh. And so what I've learned is if I am going to bring something to someone's attention, I try to be very transparent about that. About like, hey, this might sound harsh just because the way that I talk. And please know it's actually done with love and it's done with kindness and collaboration. But I know when my words come out of my mouth, it might sound a little off to you. And I
Right.
try to address it up front so that, or even after, if I say it and I'm like, and I know that sounds really harsh. I'm just really direct sometimes. So I apologize if that sounds really harsh. I don't mean it to be. Right. So, we can be, that's another example of vulnerability, other than, vulnerability means we just lose it.
Right.
Well, we
Right.
spread all our emotions on the floor. We can be vulnerable by just admitting we understand how we come across.
Yes. And if we lose it, we can come back and say, I was such a mess an hour ago. And
Yeah.
I imagined that that was really unpleasant and hard to hear. And how unskillful of me. I'm going to
Yeah.
learn to do better. And
Yeah.
so none of these things I mean, to a point, are fatal. It's just
Hmm.
that when we don't have those conversations, I'm sure you and your clients think a lot about how do we build cultures of safety where
Yeah.
people feel like
Like they
it's
can
the
do
most
that.
basic okay to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
feel it's okay. What are you modeling as a leader for your team about making mistakes, about owning failures, about apologizing, so how are you modeling the missteps you make in a way so your team knows it's safe to make some missteps
one
and
of
be
my
able to
favorite
repair them?
Yeah, one of my mentors a long time ago said there are two ways to delight your client. This was when I was in strategy consulting,
Uh-huh.
or two times to delight your client: before you screw up and after you screw up.
I love that. That's so great. Well, as we wrap up, I mean, we could probably talk for another 3 hours here. Um, what's sort of a final gem you want to share with us? Again, we don't want to give away all the ahas from the book, but what's a
Oh,
great
it's
gem or
fine.
insight you can share with us about how you go from taking a group and to making them a team? What can leaders take away?
Yeah. So I would just start with the team promise, Maria, because so many groups are unclear on what it is they are aiming to accomplish. And that doesn't mean that you actually know all the details of what it is you're going to deliver, but you're
Mm-hmm.
pointed enough in the same direction that you
Mm-hmm.
can all log on every morning and go, yeah, that
Yes.
is the cool thing that we are aiming to accomplish.
I love this because this goes beyond the company's mission and the company's purpose. Your team needs to have a
Yes.
microculture of a mission and purpose that fits in to that larger mission and purpose. And so, we might know that our larger purpose is X, but our particular team is responsible for Y.
And
This
we
is or
find that
Z.
that
Yeah.
team promise makes more difference to performance than
Mm-hmm.
their connection with the overall mission. Yes, we want to have that, but
Yeah.
it's too big, it's too grand. But if
Yeah.
I know our team is designing our support engineering function, and 6 months from now, we are going
Mm-hmm.
to have a support engineering function and we didn't have it before.
Yes. Yes. I did a lot of that work when I worked in management
Uh,
consulting of like putting in a function within the organization that didn't exist before.
yeah,
So, how do you integrate that? How do you help people understand how they're supposed to interact with that? This is making me, I know we're wrapping, but this is making me think about a previous job that I had. Um, its warts and it had its bright spots and its great opportunities, which was awesome. But the marketing leader, I remember, used to say, our one goal as a marketing team, as a global marketing team,
yeah,
is we are here to make sales easier.
that's the team
That is
promise.
our mission. That is our
Yes,
goal. And if you're
yes,
doing something that makes sales harder, you're not on the same mission. So everything you do has to be designed with that. Are you answering that question? Is this making sales easier?
that's what we
And
mean by a team promise.
exactly. And that's never left me from that
Yeah,
role as I went into my own, independent consulting. It's what can you do no matter what aspect of marketing is? It's event marketing, it's brand marketing, it's lead gen, whatever. What is it doing for the ultimate goal of driving sales?
and
And
how will
that
we know we're succeeding?
Yeah, and
And
it helps you avoid a lot of red herrings as well.
It does. It does. If I may share one other thing, because um, it's personally really meaningful to me. I've joined the board of an organization called Right to Be.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is work on creating safety in, it started with streets and then online and then workplaces and then healthcare settings. Create safety by energizing everyone, by activating everyone. Some call it bystander intervention.
Mm-hmm.
But what it really is us noticing that there's things that we can do that move things forward. So if we see somebody who isn't being treated as we would want to see treated, but it also, once you know those skills, you can see opportunities. And those are the eyes. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about Right to Be is those are the eyes that we're cultivating in organizations. Whenever we do culture work, we are saying we want everyone coming in with eyes open for
Mm-hmm.
other and for what it is we're aiming to accomplish, rather than I'm just here to do this task and somebody will tell me if I did it right and what the next one is.
Yeah. So powerful. Well, we will put a link to that organization for sure in
Oh,
your show notes. I would love to do that. But we're out of time, so let's wrap up. We are going to put all your links in the show notes,
thank you.
and we are so grateful to you for being here today. But for folks that are on the go, maybe exercising while they're listening to us, where's the one good place that they can connect with you or find out more about your work?
LinkedIn. I am
Mm-hmm.
the only Pam Fox Rollin, Rollin, on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn. And I would be so glad to connect with any listeners.
I love it. And I always do my PSA for LinkedIn is put a note that you
Oh,
heard
yes.
her on the podcast. Don't just reach out and connect. Actually
Right.
personalize your note. Thank
Yes.
you so much, Pam. I'm so glad this was well worth waiting for to have you on the show. And I look forward to hearing more. I hope folks will check out the book, Growing Groups into Teams, Real Life Stories of People Who Get Results and Thrive Together. Thank you again for being here.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Maria.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Rate, review, and share with a friend or a colleague. And until next time, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.